Hey, this video is about photo editing. I'm gonna drop some knowledge, I'm gonna share some tips and techniques with you which I consider to be crucial. These are some of the photos that I thought would be good for demonstration. You are seeing some before and after results, and shortly I'll show you what I did to achieve these results. There's a range of things to learn through these examples. Now, the holy grail of photo editing for me is to make my images appear dramatic, evocative, and atmospheric. But I photograph life, so I also want my photos to look as realistic and as lifelike as possible. So that's the sort of photo editing that you'll be learning here that applies to documentary photography, travel photography, or maybe even photography of your friends and family. Now, there's something that I wouldn't call a secret, but it's something that I haven't really talked about much through the years. For my photo editing, I don't always use Adobe Lightroom. Since about 2008, I've also been using 𝗖𝗯𝗹𝗲, on and off. Why? Well, I consider photo editing to be a crucial part of the photographic process, and I'm always searching for ways to gain an edge. Quite often, 𝗖𝗯𝗹𝗲 has provided me with that edge in photo editing. You see, 𝗖𝗖𝗋𝗋 just sees some colors that other apps don't see. This is a huge factor. It's so much of an advantage. It means that sometimes you can get powerful results with less work. Recently, 𝗖𝗖𝗋𝗋 contacted me, kind of out of nowhere. They saw one of my videos on photo editing on YouTube, they liked it, and they asked me if I would like to collaborate with them. Needless to say, I got pretty excited. I've been using the software for over a decade. I am a fan of it, so here we are. This video is longer than I initially expected to make it, but then all the tips, techniques and ideas just kept flowing, so I thought, well, why not make it as full of useful information for you as possible? So I think it's definitely going to be worth your time. Something that I think is very important to note, all of the techniques and tips and everything that you'll learn in this video is not exclusive to 𝗖𝗖𝗋𝗋. Everything that you'll learn is applicable to most of the popular photo editing apps out there. The tools are similar and sometimes they're actually identical. It's just that I think the tools in 𝗖𝗖𝗋 are often better. There's that whole color thing as well, and some of the features will make photo editing in 𝗖𝗖𝗋 faster, smoother, and just more effective. If you want to keep using whatever you are using, that's fine. Just get ready to take some notes and enjoy this video.
Okay, so I'm going to begin with this image, and I'm actually not going to give you a full overview of 𝗖𝗋𝗋𝗋's interface, simply because I want to get right into the juicy stuff, and there are plenty other people who touch on those kinds of things. I'd rather show you some techniques, tips and tricks and show you how you can get pretty great results, very realistic, fairly quickly in 𝗖𝗖𝗋. Having said all that, there are two tabs where I find most of the tools that I use. In this one, there are all the color related ones, and in this tab are just all the general tools that you'll find in most software packages for processing photos. However, there's something pretty awesome in 𝗖𝗖𝗋𝗋, and that is you can create your own tool tab. So I've created a tab of all of my favorite tools, and you can see that all these tools here are the ones that I use most frequently, and it's super convenient to be able to access them all within just the one tab. Saves you a lot of time, as do some of the other features that I'm going to be talking about. And the thing is, you can make this tab look however you want. You can place whichever tools are the ones that you use most frequently inside of here. Okay, without any further ado, this is what I do first to any of my photographs in 𝗖𝗖𝗋. I go to this tab, and then Custom Styles is sort of 𝗖𝗖𝗋's version of presets. And I have developed 4 presets / custom styles in 𝗖𝗖𝗋, and you can actually download all of them for free. Just look for the link in the description and you can get it there. For this particular photo, I'm going to use this preset. And now I just want to show you what the preset did and explain a few things. So I'm going to go to my favorite tools tab, and right away you'll see that in most of my presets the contrast is generally set to a negative value and the shadows are generally raised a little bit just to get some details in the darker areas, but really I prefer to make most of the contrast and sort of tone related adjustments in the tone curve. You don't have to do that, but to me that just feels really responsive and really intuitive. For educational purposes, I won't actually touch this here. I'll make my adjustments elsewhere using a feature that I've really come to love. First, I want to show you something else about the preset. Actually, I want to tell you about this tool, Color Balance. I think it's incredibly powerful in Capture One. It's not unique to Capture One by any means, because all this is just a collection of color wheels. So shadows, midtones, highlights. You can find that in other software packages, but I just think Capture One really nailed it, because when you move this little pointer on the color wheel, it is so incredibly responsive. I'm really impressed by it. I really like it. And so you can see that when I'm moving the pointer in the highlight color wheel, it's actually affecting the tint that the highlights in the image will have. And I'm going to undo that to get back to the preset's default, because I want this photo to have a slightly warm tint. There's also the color editor, and I'll talk about this tool in more detail later on, but also really powerful and one of the tools that makes Capture One special for me. Now, this photo isn't quite the finished image for me. I'd like to adjust the contrast and maybe the exposure. We'll see. First of all, I want to adjust the contrast, but I'm not going to adjust it here. That feature that I told you I've really fallen in love with recently is Capture One's speed edits. Speed edits are basically shortcuts to all of these main tools here. So you don't actually have to adjust them in this panel. You don't have to move the sliders. You can just press W. In this case, that's a shortcut for contrast, and you can either drag it left or right here, or you can drag your mouse left or right, or you can move your finger on your touchpad left or right. So in this case, I actually want to bring the contrast back out of the negative value and increase it a little bit to make this particular image a little bit more striking and punchy. So I'll leave it at around there. And I wouldn't mind adjusting the exposure as well. But once again, there is a shortcut for that, Q on the keyboard. And because some of the areas are looking a little bit too bright for my liking, I'm just going to bring the exposure down just a tiny bit. So you can see that incredibly quickly with just the preset and a few adjustments, I've turned the photograph from this is the before, to this, the after. Generally, after I finish with a photo, I go here, and these are called export recipes. So basically you're exporting a photo and the presets for exporting your photo. This is the one that I use. I like to have all of my photos to be 6500 pixels on the long side using Adobe RGB 1998 color space. The JPEG is always at 100 when I'm doing any serious kind of work, and that's it. You press export, or you can also create a shortcut for that in Capture One. Alright, so this is the next photo that I want to show you, and I'm actually not going to be going step by step through all of the actions and the adjustments that I've made, because that would make the video at least a couple of hours long. Instead, I'm going to be breaking down my actions and just explaining the things that are really key and the things from which you can extract important photo editing lessons for yourself. So in this case, you can see that I applied the preset striking, and this is what the photo looked like before I applied the preset, and this is what it looks like after. I'm going to go to my favorite tools tab, and the key adjustment that I made here is to the tone curve. You can see that it's quite dramatic the way that I've twisted it. Again, it's my preference to use the tone curve. You don't have to, but for me, it just feels like one of the most intuitive ways to process photographs. So the tone curve is responsible for this pretty deep shadow right here, and for the general overall contrast. Now, right away, I want to draw your attention to something very important, to something that I think is a very common mistake that many photographers do in post-processing. Many photographers will go here to shadow, and they'll bring the value all the way up, I don't know, to around here. Why? Because they want to bring out the detail in the shadows. Okay, maybe I've exaggerated a little bit. Maybe they bring it to like, around here, which is still quite a bit more than necessary. And my question would be, well, why do you need to see all this detail? I mean, in real life, we have quite distinct dark shadows in certain scenes which we're looking at, and we have even sometimes really bright areas or spots that would be equivalent to overexposed in a photographic frame. So I do think that there is a place for really deep shadows and even for really bright spots in photographs. In fact, I say that we should embrace the shadows. And in this particular scenario, I was attracted to the interplay between the shadow and the brighter part of the photograph, and even these really bright animals that are being herded. Now with this image right here, I actually am going to show you step by step what I did, because all I did was select the custom style striking, and that's it. I could have done more. I could have maybe enhanced a little bit of her face, of her hand, and I'll get to that a little later on. But for educational purposes, and really in most cases, I don't need to do anything else. And this is also a very, very important key. It's crucial to know when to stop. Sometimes we keep making all these adjustments to the photographs when really there is no need for it. So know when to stop, and your images will end up actually looking better than if you make too many adjustments. This is before the preset was applied, and this is after. Oh, and of course, the key adjustment here, once again, was the tone curve. That's what's responsible for making this look more dramatic and contrasty. Okay, with this photo, I want to demonstrate to you another preset and what effect it has on a photograph. So, warmer preserved highlights, and I'll show you right away the key characteristics of this preset. So in the highlights color wheel, again, the highlights are a little bit warmer, but then what's really important is that the brightness of the highlights has been brought down, and you can actually bring it up or bring it down. I'm going to undo that. And this feature is particularly useful if you have a really bright area like this part of the sky. It could be actually even a little bit overexposed. Here it's not quite, but it's almost there. And with the preset, you can see that the highlight areas just become a little bit more full-bodied. And if you do have a white overexposed blotch, then this can be convenient to kind of mask it and cover it. The midtones here have also been adjusted a little bit. You can see that if I play around with this, the midtones will be changed. I'll undo that. And the shadow, actually, I don't touch in any of my presets, because I feel that if I adjust them, that the image just becomes a little too stylized for my liking, and I feel that it really starts to depart from looking realistic. If I would change anything in this photo, I would press S on the keyboard, which is a shortcut for shadow, and I would bring up the value just a little bit. Okay, so now I'm done. Before and after. With this photo, I want to demonstrate something that I do quite often to many of my photographs, and that is enhance certain elements and textures within the frame. How do I do that? Well, in Capture One, there is a feature called Style Brushes, and you can create your own custom style brushes. I've created one that I've called Enhance, and the way to use it is you just paint in the areas that you want to enhance within the frame. If you press Control Option on the keyboard and drag your finger to the right of the touchpad or to the left. You are going to change the size of the brush. And if you drag it down or up, you are going to change the hardness. In my case, I usually like to have the brushes being on the soft side, and I'm going to start painting right over the smoke because I want the smoke to be enhanced and I want it to stand out. I sort of want it to pop out a little bit from the frame. And I want exactly the same for this cloud right here and here as well. Now, what adjustments am I actually applying with this enhanced custom style brush? Well, it's these ones. I have raised the value in clarity to 43 and structure to 9. So that is what's responsible for making certain parts of the images pop out a little bit. Also note that a layer has been created. It's called Enhance because it's the Enhance Style brush. If I press M on the keyboard, I will see exactly where my effect has been applied. In the case of the Enhance Style brush, though, I prefer to see the actual effect as I'm applying it rather than seeing that red mask overlay. And while I'm at it, I'm also enhancing the textures of these rocks, these really sort of dangerous looking jagged rocks. I think that by making them stand out a little bit, I'm going to make them even more intimidating and menacing. So now I'm going to untoggle that and toggle it on, and I'll zoom in just a little bit into the smoke, and I'll untoggle it again and toggle it back on. So you can see that you can enhance the textures and make certain elements pop out pretty quickly if you create a custom style brush of this sort. Here's the next example, and with this one I want to show you another really common thing that I do to many of my landscape photos. I've already applied the preset. I've made this frame look quite dramatic and contrasty with quite deep shadows. As you can see, this is how the frame looked before and this is how it looks after. But after I applied my effects, the sky actually started to look a little bit too bright. So there is a solution to this, and I would go to this tool right here, gradient mask. There is a version of the gradient mask in different software packages, but again, I think that the version in Capture One is quite good. I can also press L on the keyboard, that's the shortcut. I can press M to see where the effect will be applied, and as I drag it over, I can see exactly where the effect is going to take place. Now I can toggle it off. I'm going to press Q on the keyboard for exposure, and I'm going to bring the exposure down to here. Then I'm going to press W for contrast. I'm going to increase the contrast a little bit. Then I'm going to press Z, which is the shortcut for clarity, and I'm going to increase the clarity a little bit. Another really cool feature in Capture One is that you can actually go to the adjustment layer, and it's been called adjustment layer 1 as a default when I applied the gradient mask, and I'm actually going to rename it to sky. This layer here, I can actually adjust absolutely all of these settings within the layer. So, for example, the curve. I actually kind of like that. I'll leave that. Or you can adjust anything else. And you can't do that in Lightroom. You can't adjust absolutely everything for a particular element within the frame, but in Capture One you can, and I really love that. So I've adjusted the curve, and another thing that I'm going to adjust is the tint, because, well, I remember that the setting sun was giving the sky a very slightly pinkish tint. So I'm going to adjust that, maybe not quite as much, maybe to about there. And I'm going to toggle the sky off and on, off and on, and you can see that there's quite a significant difference, and very quickly I've transformed this photo from this to this. Okay, this photo, preset already applied. And this photo, along with the one before and a couple of the other ones that I'm going to show you, I think that they fall into sort of the most common category of photographs where I will apply the preset and I will just apply 1 or 2 adjustments and I'm done. So what are the 2 adjustments that I've made here? Well, I've made one to the sky. So currently I've toggled off the adjustments, but now they're on and they're very subtle, but it's all about the subtle details, as I keep saying. And then I used the enhance style brush. So currently it's toggled off. Now I'm toggling it on. And I'll zoom in so you can have a better look because I painted over some of these sea lines. Off and on. And I'll press M just to show you all the areas that I've enhanced. Now you can take this idea of enhancing elements within the frame and apply it to photos of humans, which is my preferred subject. I have already applied the preset, custom style. It's this one here. And so that's what the photo looks like with the preset. However, I have also already enhanced parts of the image and I'm going to toggle those enhancements on, off and on. You can see where I painted with the enhance brush. I'll zoom in so that you can see a little bit better. Enhancements off, enhancements on. So I've really made certain facial features, the wrinkles stand out a little bit more. Also, this hand here, you can see that when I turn the enhancements on, certain textures in it become more prominent. Same thing for the bottom hand. But I actually will make an additional little adjustment here. So I'm going to create another layer. And right away, I'm going to call it eyes because I'm going to adjust the eyes. This is something that I do very, very often, but it's really key not to overdo the eyes. It's one of my pet hates when the eyes are overdone. I've even talked about this in a past YouTube video. So I get the brush to about the size that I want. I press M to see exactly where I'll be applying the effect. I'll actually make the brush a tiny bit smaller and I'm painting over the eyes. I can see exactly where the effect is going to be applied. I'm going to toggle off the mask and I'm going to press S, which is the speed edit for shadows. I'm going to raise the value, not a whole lot, just a bit. And then I'm going to press Z and I'm going to raise the value of clarity. Okay, now let's toggle the effect off and on, off and on. You see it's not really dramatic, but I like it. It just gives the eyes a little bit more of a pop. And zoomed out, off and on. And I just want to talk or demonstrate to you what some people do. Sometimes people will just go crazy. They'll bring the exposure, like, I don't know, all the way up. And then the eyes will look like they belong to an alien. You know, that's maybe kind of cool, but that is very, very far from reality. And, well, this guy, I guess he might be suffering from cataracts, so his eyes are a little bit brighter. But in general, this is just a really insane looking effect. So I'm definitely going to undo that. Anyway, just to show you the image before, all of the adjustments, and after. This idea of enhancing textures can be applied to virtually anything. So in this particular case, I want to enhance the texture, you know, of the wrinkles and the rough skin on this man's hand and some of the texture of this piece of leather. So I'm gonna toggle the enhance layer on, toggle it off. I'll zoom in to show you the details. On, off, back on. And if I press M, you can see all the parts that I painted on, or all the parts of the frame that I enhanced. So you can enhance pretty much anything that you want to stand out in your photograph. With this photo, there's a new little lesson to learn and another feature of Capture One that I want to draw your attention to. I've applied my preset, I've enhanced the wrinkles, the sweat, and actually Some of this is probably salt on his face because this is a salt worker. I've brightened his eyes. You can see if I toggle them off and back on. But the specific thing to draw your attention to with this photo is how this man's face has started to look. When the tone curve is adjusted, and in this case you can see that it was adjusted quite dramatically, and I like that because there is a sense of drama in this portrait. I wanted that sense of drama, but as a result the skin tone has started to look somewhat unrealistic, and this is a very, very common issue that will come up when you adjust the tone curve to this extent. So Capture One has a very specialized tool for that. It's called Skin Tone under Color Editor, and in Color Editor you can actually adjust the colors by sort of separating them and choosing them one by one like this, or picking a color within the frame with a color picker, or you can focus on the skin tone and you can pick the skin tone with a color picker, and that's exactly what I'm going to do here. And next I'm going to brighten it as much as I can, and let me undo that. You can see the extent to which I have brightened the skin. So it was looking too dark, and if I bring the effect back you can see that now it's looking brighter. The other thing is that I think that it looks a little bit too much on the red side, and you can remedy that by going to Hue and then dragging Hue all the way to here. So now it has a very different look. His skin looks quite different from how it looked initially after I applied the preset. And let's just reset these effects. So that's before I adjusted the skin tone colors, and this is after. I really love this tool because as a photographer of people, I often find myself having to adjust the colors of people's skin tones to get them to look realistic. I like it when my portraits look striking, but I don't like it when the people start to look like aliens. And this guy is already kind of looking a little bit otherworldly because of this rough environment that he works in. So I really don't want to make him look any more otherworldly than he has to. Okay, so by now I have introduced you to most of the basics of Capture One, and I've given you a pretty good insight into my approach towards editing photos in Capture One. With this photo, I just want to introduce you to another little feature that I use quite often. I've already applied the preset to this image and I've brightened it, but as a result the sky started to look a little bit bright, and I remember that it was quite dark and dramatic, and what attracted me to this scene was indeed the fact that I had this dark, stormy sky and the bright light from the setting sun. So what I did was I created a layer by using the gradient mask, and I applied various adjustments within this layer, and this is how the sky looks as a result. The problem, of course, is that now the man's face is looking a little bit too dark. So how can we fix that? Well, we can go right here, Luma Range, and I'm going to toggle this on, display mask. And again, this tool isn't unique to Capture One. I just think that they've done it really nicely. You are selecting the range of tones that the effects will be applied to. So here I'm going to drag this all the way to the right because I want all the really extremely bright areas to be affected, but I don't want the extremely dark areas or even sort of mid-level dark areas to be affected. You can see how some parts of the image are opening up now, but I do want those clouds to be affected, I think. Let me toggle the mask off, and sometimes adjusting the radius value here can make things smoother, and it does so here. I'm going to toggle this back on again. This really takes sometimes quite a bit of tweaking to get it right, and I'll toggle it off again. Okay, I think this is getting pretty good, but there's still more that I can do. So the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to apply this, and I want the adjustments to apply more precisely to the sky. So what I will do is I'm going to zoom in on the man's face, and I'm going to choose the eraser by pressing E on the keyboard. I'm going to make this eraser larger. I'm going to toggle the mask on, and I'm going to start erasing. Now, it asks me, do you want to rasterize the mask? This basically means that I will not be able to adjust the gradient mask anymore. I won't be able to make it larger or smaller, and sure, that's fine. And I'm going to not paint. Well, essentially it's like painting, but I am actually erasing a part of the mask that I created for the sky, but that was overlapping with the man's face. It also overlapped a little bit with his jumper, collar. If I really want to be precise, I can also erase it on the hand. Overdid a little bit there. But, well, you get the idea. So I'm going to toggle the mask overlay off again and zoom out. All right, that looks pretty good to me now. The sky looks very dramatic and his face still looks bright from the sun that's illuminating him. So I'm going to toggle the sky layer off and back on. Off and on. This is before any of the adjustments, and this is after. Alright, so now this here is actually what I consider to be the most complicated image to process out of all the images that I have shown you. Here I'm showing it to you before the preset or any of the effects, and I applied this preset here, multi-purpose, and it made the photo look like this. So pretty nice contrast, definitely more striking and dramatic, but definitely certain things are missing. And the very first one is the fact that the sky looks way too bright. Certain other elements are looking too bright as well, and I think I can do a lot more with the face. So let's go right here, and you can see that already these are all the adjustment layers that I created that I've toggled off for the moment, but I will be toggling them on one by one. So the very first one is the sky. I'm going to toggle it on and have a look. The sky looks completely different now. It has a lot of body to it, a lot of color now. Also, these bushes here, look, if I toggle this off, you can see that actually parts of them are getting lost in this sort of overexposed white blotch. So when I turn this layer back on, we are starting to see much more of these bushes. But actually this is something that's very, very tricky to get right. And that's why I had to go into Luma Range and get the right Luma Range. I had to play around with the radius. A lot of experimenting in a case like that. It's not that I'm using more sophisticated or complex tools, it's just that it takes more experimenting to get everything right. And look here, for example, even though I did select a specific Luma range, this man's face is still looking too dark. So that's what I started to take care of next. I created a separate layer just for the face, and I'm going to toggle that on now. And look at that. It's actually his face and his hand that I adjusted here. I painted over the area, I adjusted the skin tone, I went into clarity and structure and shadow. So the main key here was that I just needed to really experiment a lot to get the right combination of adjustments. I'm going to zoom right out, and the next layer that I created was for the sheep. As you can see, they're looking a little bit too bright, and I could leave the photo like this, but I want to show you what happens when you really dedicate some time to a photograph and you really try to perfect it. So I'm going to toggle this layer on, and you can see that their backs are now much more visible. I also adjusted the Luma range. You can see the mask. I'm going to cancel that. And so now you can see a lot more detail in their backs as a result. The shirt, same story there. It was looking too bright. Not going to go too much into that. I darkened it. The ground, exactly the same thing. I wanted to just darken the bottom part of the ground. And then the final detail is the turban. You'll only really see it if I zoom in, and then I'm toggling that adjustment layer, and if I toggle it off and back on, you can see that it's only a very, very slight change. But again, if you want to dedicate the time, if you want to work on all of the details, that's what you do. I'm going to show you the image before all of the adjustments and after. And it actually looks like quite a radical difference, but yet the adjusted image is not looking like it's out of the realm of reality. I tried to replicate in the very best way that I could what I saw in front of me. The camera couldn't do it without the help of a photo editing software, but I remember that the sky was looking quite bright, yet it had a lot more detail in it than something like this. So I brought all of that detail back. Oh, and actually I do want to show you that I went into Color Editor Advanced, and then I selected the colors of the sky, and so I raised the saturation. You can see if I toggle this off that the sky looks quite a bit less colorful, and I'll toggle it back on and now it's much more colorful. And then also this part here, I darkened it. So these are all the little tricks that exist and that sometimes you have to pull out to get the most out of a photograph. Now, the question is a photograph really worth spending so much time on? And that's something that only you can answer. This to me was a pretty important image that I was trying to get for days and days, and then I was finally able to follow this guy who's a Rabari tribesman in India. So I went out with him in the morning as he was taking out his animals, and this is one of the photos that I got. So it was definitely worth it for me to work on it. Some photos maybe you need to process just because you didn't get the settings right, just because they're bad and maybe they're not worth saving. But it is definitely great to know that there are so many tools in Capture One that will help you make the most of a photograph if you so choose.
And that was the last example. Now, as I mentioned, everything that you've learned in this video can be applied in most of the popular photo editing apps out there. If, however, this video has raised your interest in Capture One, then you're in luck. You can download a free trial of Capture One, and they've provided me with a 20% discount for the viewers of this video. All of the info and all of the relevant links are in the description below. Also down there, you'll find the free presets that I mentioned in the beginning. Anyway, my honest advice and opinion: if you are as in love with photography and with photo editing as I am, then I think that Capture One is really worth a try. That's it from me. I really hope that you found this video useful. If you did, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell. Check out this video if you want to learn how to avoid some really common but really bad photo editing mistakes. Okay, goodbye for now.